Hi everyone, welcome to this short little video with Amanda Williams. So she's a data protection specialist, and we are going to go through why you do or don't necessarily need a contract, data processing agreements, and some top tips from Amanda on covering your butt as a freelancer when it comes to working with clients. So, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to kick us off by telling us a little bit about contracts, like why we should have one?
Okay. Hi, thanks for asking me, Katie. This is, it's really important. I mean, I think we've all, met a client, sent some emails, agreed a price, agreed what we're going to do, and then just got on with the job, haven't we? Particularly in Cornwall, I think that's fairly common, really, isn't it? But what I'm going to suggest to you that is really, to protect yourself, you should have a contract in place with your client. Now, I'm not a contracts lawyer. What I am is a data protection specialist and a marketer. And I spent most of my life in pharmaceuticals, which is highly regulated, but I work for a legal consultancy. So we do have consultant lawyers that help us with these contracts. But if you've got a contract in place, it's going to protect you because, for example, as part of your contract, you'll say what your notice period is. What you don't want is your client then saying, well, thank you very much, goodbye, we don't want you to work anymore. So you want to be able to set, 30 days notice or 60 days notice, whatever is right for you. And then you can, without a contract, you have unlimited liability. So you will want to limit that within your contract. So, for example, if you were doing a job that was an 8-week stint, you might limit that liability to sort of the 8 weeks that you were doing the job. So without a contract, you don't have that protection. And as business people, we don't have the same protections that a consumer would if there wasn't a contract in place. There's kind of consumer law, but business people, we kind of have to take a bit of responsibility. And then the other issue is for creatives, if you're using your own products, content, charts and photos, what happens with that? That's your IP. How do you assign that or license that to your client, or what do you do? So that's all taken care of in a contract as well. And then we, this year, particular 2020, you might have come across the word force majeure. What happens if you can't perform that contract? What happens if you were ill, or there's another event that stops you doing it? So that's all taken care of in the contract as well. And there are other things, but mainly it's there to set out your obligations, their obligations, what happens if there's a breach, and it keeps you, it does protect you. So I would suggest get yourself a contract with your clients. Have one ready to go. You can just roll it out, look really professional, and, give yourself a bit of confidence.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting that you talk about, which I hadn't really considered, is that actually as a consumer, you're more protected by the law, whereas as a business, effectively, you have more responsibilities within that, to protect.
Yeah.
So the other thing I think is really important, and I know it's your specialism, and it's like the bane of most marketers' life, probably SME marketing, particularly, I think it's one of those things that was an absolute nightmare a few years ago, GDPR, data processing. So within our contracts now, if we're dealing with any kind of data, we do need to be protected and also state what we're doing. Is that right?
Yeah, so within your contract, there'll be a data processing clause, but what you also need is you need a data processing agreement. And this means that it sets out the relationship between you and your client. So just very briefly, your client is a data controller. So they decide what's going to happen with the data that they're accountable for. But they've asked you to come along and do things that either they can't do or they don't have time to do, or that you're a real specialist in that. So you become their data processor, and you need an agreement between the two of you that sets out what you're going to do with that data, the type of data you're going to handle, how long you're going to handle it for, exactly what you're going to do. And then it binds you to your responsibilities within the sort of, data protection obligations. Okay. So, for example, the data processor will only follow the instructions of the data controller. And what you don't want to do as a data processor is to be making decisions that you haven't been instructed to make, because you're jointly liable for any data breaches. So you want to be very careful. So it's really important to have those things in place. And I think sometimes you'll find that your client may give one to you and you will just sign it. But I think most likely they probably won't. So it's something you can have one ready to go, and then you can tailor it according to what the client needs. So I'd say that's really important, because that's, lawfully you should have one of these in place, because it's about protecting the personal data that your client is accountable for, like his customers or staff, things like that.
So a question that, I suppose this is more like your personal experience, but if you're working with a client who maybe is much more reliant on you as a consultant or freelancer to effectively kind of just get it done, if you're not being instructed in the way that you probably know legally you need to be, is there almost something that, would you just suggest that we actually just go back to the client and say, I would suggest this, are you happy for me to do that? Or do you think that actually it's like just don't go there if you've not been instructed?
Yeah, so on your agreement, you can list the instructions that you're given. Now, they don't need to be like things that just day-to-day instructions, but like it might be that, that you're going to manage their email marketing list and all the things that entails. So then when they ask you to do something within that, then that's kind of covered. But so kind of you can be quite detailed, but you don't need to it's not all the day-to-day decisions. It's those kind of overarching, what do they want you to do with the data? Okay. And I think if they then want you to do something that you're a little bit concerned about from a data protection point of view, do your due diligence and look on the ICO website or contact somebody like me and say, I'm a bit concerned about what I'm being asked to do. Because although they're accountable, you're kind of jointly liable. And actually, you could be there to help them, to guide them through what they can and can't do. Because after all, you're the one with the marketing expertise. And they might have a great idea, but then you're the consultant that might say, actually, that's a great idea, and there's a few issues with it. It might be that you just need to kind of document your findings, or it might be that actually that it's not a good idea. So it very much depends. But the other thing that's really important, that if you're using other processors to if you're passing on work as a consultant to other processors, you need to list those, because your client, the data controller, has a right to object to that. So that's quite important. It's about, I often compare it to a ball game where it's that, the data controller throws the ball to you to keep safe. Well, where are you throwing it to? Are you throwing it to somebody else? Are they going to keep it safe? So if you think about it in those terms, it's important to document all of those things.
Okay. That's ideal. We can do this, Amanda. And then so I think then the final thing from you, if you're happy to please give us. So I know you've got some really great top tips around some of this stuff. Can you give us a few of those, please?
I will. I'm going to put my glasses on so I don't miss any off, because they're really important. So really important, first thing is train yourself. Get yourself on the ICO website, have a chat with me, come on my Make Marketing Work Facebook group, and train yourself on what's good and what isn't, what you can do, what you can't do. If you're using sub-processors, list them. Be prepared for your client to audit everything you're doing, because they have a right to do that. When you stop working for your client, return the data to them, the personal data of their customers, for example, or delete it. Because if you don't, and then you were to reuse it, actually, that's a criminal act now, since the Data Protection Act a couple of years ago. So that's really, really important. But yeah, train yourself up, take that next step in data protection. Don't be freaked out by it. It's really, I've kind of learnt to love. I like it genuinely. I do. I know I'm strange and I'm a nerd, but I do genuinely. I genuinely enjoy it. And there's always something new. There's always something new to learn, and there's always a conundrum that you kind of can get to the bottom of, which is quite exciting. So yeah, they're the kind of really important things. protect yourself by getting yourself a contract between you and your client. Get your DPAs, get them all sorted. So then when you get your next client, this document is ready to go. All you need to do is tailor it to who your client is, what the instructions are, what you'll be doing for them. And then you're that should give you confidence really in your own processes as well.
You also said when it comes to the IPO that they are they're not going to expect you to be perfect.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The ICO. Yeah.
So they want to see your workings, don't they? But they're not necessarily going to expect you to have a flawless process in place. Yeah. It's more about demonstrating that you're doing most of what you can. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect. And if you are perfect, you won't be perfect for very long, because the minute you take on a new member of staff, you're not perfect again, because it kind of degrades. And I've heard the ICO talk a few times, and they've said that they would rather see somebody that's done all their workings out. And if they've kind of gone a bit wrong somewhere, they'd rather see that than somebody that hasn't done anything and that's just made a decision, because then they can go back through with you. They can say, do you know what? We can see how you work that out. And that's maybe where we would have made a different decision. So document, it's a bit like the maths teacher at school. It's not enough to give the answer. You need to show your workings out. So document things, document decisions. And if the ICO were to ever come and ask to see that documentation, you've got something to show them. And then train yourself as well, because that's the other thing they want to see. They like to see progression and movement. And there are certain things that you just really can't do. So just don't do them. Find out what they are. For example, don't email people that have unsubscribed. That's an absolute no-no. And there are other things that are slightly perhaps a bit more open to interpretation, but train yourself up and find out what you can and can't do, and where you can make decisions and what you can do to support those decisions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What we will do is we'll get the some of those links to places like the IPO, Amanda's group that gives top tips, Cloud Legal as well, where you can potentially get contracts. We'll put all of those in the description below. And thank you so much for joining us, Amanda. It's I'm glad that you enjoy it, because so many of us are just like,
well, you know what? I did a postgrad, so you don't have to. I'm enough of a nerd to actually quite enjoy the drilling down into the little nitty-gritty bits. But I'm a creative as well, and I love marketing, and I like creating content and stories and pictures. So I'm a weird kind of hybrid, but then that's why I'm a good person for this space. And now I have access to some amazing lawyers that can help out on those things like IP and contractual issues, which is not my strong point, and I wouldn't ever pretend that it was, but we all have our bits to play, don't we? All have our role to play.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and we hope that you guys found that useful.